Hopefully you all know me by now, but my name is Laura. I'm the nutritionist here, and I was going to give you all a little bit of background about me so you can get to know me a little bit better before I got into it. I was born and raised here in Houston, Texas. I grew up playing sports, and I really loved sports and athletics, and just kind of being active, and so because of that, I always figured I would grow up and I would do something with physical activity, maybe physical therapy for a while I was thinking about. And then my senior year, one of my really close friends had a really serious eating disorder, and she was hospitalized for a few months. And through that, I was able to watch what a nutritionist was able to do through their love for food and their desire to help others through that. And that really made me decide I wanted to be a nutritionist. So that sent me off to Birmingham, Alabama, where I got my degree from Stanford University in nutrition. And then after my 4 years was up there, I wanted to come back to Texas to be closer to family. And that's kind of what led me here to Inner Element. So I've been here for a little over a month, loving it so far. And so that's kind of why I'm here and what got me here. So today we're going to talk about our challenge. Motivation is obviously what got you all to sign up for it and brought you in today, which is awesome. But we're really going to focus for the next 6 weeks on building those habits. We want to have sustainable habits that are going to be able to endure past the 6 weeks. So we are going to talk today about some tips for success. We're going to talk a little bit about goal setting, and we're going to touch on some of the foundations of nutrition. Nowadays it's really hard to differentiate from the facts versus the fiction. You're learning about different diets, hearing different nutrition facts on social media, on websites, everywhere you're hearing different things about nutrition, and it can be kind of overwhelming to try and figure out for yourself what's correct and what's fiction. So we're going to touch on that a little bit. We're also going to look more in detail at the meal plan that hopefully everyone has seen by now. And then we're going to talk about what y'all's first steps are going to be in the challenge and how we are going to pick a winner. So some things we should be thinking about as we start this challenge in our own minds, and how maybe we could change some of those things for the challenge, or what things we're doing really right before we start the challenge. Are you eating consistently? It's really important to eat every 3 hours, and we're going to touch a little bit more on all of these things, but eating consistently is important to think about. Is what you're eating balanced? Are you eating your carbs, proteins, fats? Those are your 3 macros. Are you eating those with all of your meals and snacks? Are you drinking 80 ounces or more of water a day? If not, what are you drinking? Are you drinking sodas? Are you drinking juices? Are you eating around your workouts before and after? How are you eating around your workouts? What are you eating around your workouts? How do you feel that your food is affecting your workouts? Are you eating out? If so, what kind of restaurants are you going to? What are you ordering? Do you get the 3 courses? Your appetizers, your desserts? Are you getting drinks? Are you just getting entrees? Things like that to think about. And then, have you ever tracked your food? We're going to talk a little bit more about MyFitnessPal because that's what we're going to be using for the challenge. But go ahead and think about if you did track it, what worked for you, did you like it, some issues you had with it. And then, are you focusing more on your quality of food or your quantity? Both is important. If you're eating the right quality of food but way too much of it, that's not going to be good. If you're eating the wrong quality of food, not enough of it, you're not going to have sustained energy. So it's really important to think about both things whenever you're thinking about your diets. So now we're going to look some more at all of that. So for goal setting, hopefully you all have met with either Erin or I and gotten your in-body results and talked a little bit more in detail about some of these things. It's going to be kind of hard to set goals if you don't know where you're at and where you want to be. So if you haven't met with us, make sure to do that as close to Monday as you can next week. Whenever we think about setting goals, we want to make sure we are setting SMART goals. That means our goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So what does that look like for you? You should be able to clearly state what your goals are to anyone who asks. Writing it down is helpful because it's kind of a tangible piece of evidence of what you want to do and why you want to do it. It's important to know why you're going to set those goals for yourselves because that's going to be motivating for you to kind of hold on to as you're trying to reach those goals. Like I said, you want to make sure that you know why you're doing it. You want to be able to tell other people so that they can hold you accountable. It's easier to reach these goals whenever you have people who know what you're trying to do and how you're trying to get there. whether that be anyone here at the gym, your coworkers, family. Just make sure that you are telling people what they are so they can hold you accountable. So an example of a SMART goal for the 6-week challenge would be to lose 6 pounds and 1.5% body fat in the next 6 weeks. It's specific because we know we're going to lose our weight and our percent body fat. It's measurable because we know we want 6 pounds and 1.5% body fat. It's attainable and realistic because it's in those parameters of it's healthy and advised to lose no more than 1 to 1.5 pounds a week and 1 to 1.5% of body fat a month. So it's attainable and realistic in those senses, and it's time sensitive because we have the 6 weeks already set out for us. So y'all can pull out your phones or use your paper if you want to, and just take a second to think about what your goals are going to be and a few action steps that you can have going into this challenge. Or if you need paper, you can let us know. There's also, you're going to see something that looks kind of like that at the very beginning of your meal plan, so make sure that you fill that out as well on your meal plan. Now we're going to kind of get into the foundations of nutrition. We're going to start by talking about our carbohydrates because that is kind of the most abundant macronutrient that we want to get in our diet. About 40% of our diet should be from carbohydrates. It's your body's main source of fuel. When you aren't getting enough of it, your body has to use protein as fuel, and we don't want to use up that. And also carbohydrates is going to help break down fat. So 40% of your diet should come from carbohydrates. Fiber is a non-digestible carbohydrate that keeps you feeling full, and it also lowers your cholesterol. That's the kind of carbs you're going to find from your vegetables. So we want to focus a lot on our non-starchy carbs that are going to be high in fiber and low in sugar whenever we think about creating our plates. Your glycemic index is what's going to tell you how fast your blood sugar is going to rise after you eat a certain food. Typically, we want to kind of stay away from those higher glycemic foods. After a workout is going to be the time you can eat that. Fruits like bananas are higher glycemic index, so that's why people typically eat that after a workout. But typically, we want to try to stay away from those. The reason it's okay after a workout is because your blood sugar is going to be lower, and so having that higher glycemic index is going to kind of help supplement that. As far as artificial sweeteners go, we want to kind of stay away from those. Stevia is plant-based, so it is not the worst option, but it's also better to not have it. So you can think about that when you think about your artificial sweeteners. And then when we think of the natural sweeteners like honey and agave, those are better than artificial. We just need to be mindful of how much of it we're eating because it's processed in the liver, and what doesn't get burned off is going to turn into fat. So we just need to be mindful about our sugar consumption, whether it be raw or natural or artificial. Some sources of carbohydrates, like I said, we want them to be high in fiber, low in sugar. We want half of our plate to come from those non-starchy carbohydrates. That's going to be your vegetables, your broccoli, your carrots, those types of foods. A fourth of your plate can come from the starchy or complex carbohydrates. That's going to be your sweet potatoes, your squash, or your grains. What you typically think of when you think of carbohydrates maybe is grains. That should only be a fourth of your plate, not the whole half. But we do want to incorporate those also. And then foods that we want to kind of keep in moderation are going to be your bread, rice cakes. Like I said, the bananas and grapes, good for after a workout. We don't want to emphasize it though. As far as protein is going to be our next macronutrient. We should have about 30% of our diet come from proteins. Proteins help regulate body functions. They help with hormone regulation. They're also very important. and they are built up from essential and non-essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are what we need to focus on getting from our diet because our body can't synthesize them alone. So essential amino acids, there's 9 of them. They can be found in like eggs and dairy. Eggs are actually the only source that has it's a complete protein because it provides all 9 essential amino acids. You have complementary proteins, and that means when you pair them together, they provide all 9. Things like beans and rice are going to give you all 9 essential amino acids. And some sources of protein, whenever we think about 30% of our diet coming from protein, we want to emphasize the lean meats. So that's going to be your chicken, fish, turkey, egg whites. That's what we want to get the most of. Our medium fat meats are going to be our eggs. That's going to be our dark meats, our dark chicken. And then our high fat meats we want to really limit. That's going to be our red meats, our bacon. So we want to keep those as low as possible. And then lastly, fat. Fat has a bad reputation, but we really do need it in our body. It's very important for our health. We want to try to get our fat from more plant-based or nut-based sources, not so much the meat sources. So we want to limit our saturated fats and our trans fats. Those are going to raise your bad cholesterol, and they're going to decrease your good cholesterol. So that's the fat you're going to get from processed foods. That's why we want to try to keep it coming from plant-based or nut-based foods. So we want to limit our saturated and our trans fat, and we want to really increase our omega-3s. Omega-3s are really important. They're an integral part of your cell membranes all throughout your body. They have a part in the hormones that regulate blood clotting, that control the contraction and the relaxation of your artery walls. They do a lot of stuff, and typically people are actually deficient in omega-3s. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough of those. That's going to come from things like flaxseed, chia seeds, fish, salmon. All those things are going to have a lot of omega-3s in them. Some sources of fats, the fats that we want to include are going to be our avocados, like I said, our nuts, our coconut oil. We don't want to emphasize our fried foods or our baked goods or our chips. That's going to be the trans and saturated fats that we're trying to avoid. So now we're going to look a little bit at reshaping our plate. For starters, we need to think about what we're drinking. Liquids are a really good way to sneak in extra calories and sugar that you don't want. So we need to make sure that we're drinking enough water, emphasizing the water. Being mindful of the juices that are marketed as real fruit juices, because those are still going to be pretty high in sugar. So just being conscious of what kind of drinks you're drinking. When we get into food logging, we need to make sure that we're keeping track of all the drinks we're drinking, because that's going to, if we're not logging it, it's going to show us not accurately what you're getting in, and it might not lead to the best results. Like I said, for proteins, we want to be choosing our lean meats whenever we're thinking about building our plates. When we think protein, sometimes we just think any meat, but really try to focus on the lean meats, your chicken, turkey, fish, egg whites, and those kind of things. Whole foods. So the point of this challenge and this meal plan is really to emphasize whole, real foods. Whenever you're shopping at the grocery store, if you stay around the perimeter of the grocery store, that's where you're going to find your produce, your lean proteins, your dairy. It's once you get down the aisles that you find all the processed foods, and that's kind of what we're trying to avoid for this 6 weeks. Your ingredient list should either be non-existent, like it is on produce, or really short. So just keep that in mind as you're grocery shopping, that Whole Foods is always going to be the better option. And then, like I said, sugars and natural fruit juices, they're going to be in there a lot more abundantly than you might imagine. Even in granola bars that we feel like are healthy, and they still are good for you, but they do have a lot of sugar. So you need to think about that whenever you're thinking about what your goals are going to be, and how much sugar you're intaking. And then also on the ingredient label, the most abundant ingredient is going to be first. So if the first ingredient on anything is sugar, you should really think about how much that actually is going to translate to. And also, if it's the longer the ingredient list is, the more stuff they're sneaking in. So if there's a bunch of words on the ingredient list that you don't know what they mean, you might not want to put it in your body. So just kind of be mindful of the ingredient list. So here's kind of a visual of the plate method that we've been talking about. We have half of our plate being our non-starchy vegetables, a fourth of it being the lean proteins, and a fourth of it being your starchy or complex carbohydrates or your grains. So now the meal plan. This challenge comes with 6 weeks of meal plans. You have groceries and your recipe lists with all of them. There is a range on the meal plan. So I know, for example, on Monday, your breakfast item is going to be 2/3 to a cup of oatmeal. So depending on what your goals are, you'll decide what range you want to be in. And if you have any questions, you can ask me about it. But if you're aiming to lose weight, you're probably going to err towards the side of 2/3 cup. And if you want to gain or maintain, you'll err more up. And all the things have ranges like that you can try to follow. So that'll be helpful. If it has asterisks next to it, it means that it's a recipe from Healthy Steps Nutrition. You can find that recipe on healthystepsnutrition.com. You can go to the nutrition tab, or you can just type it in the search bar, and your recipe will pop right up. And all the portion sizes are cooked. So whenever it says 2/3 to a cup of oatmeal, that's cooked oatmeal. Typically, the rule of thumb is that grains double when they're cooked and vegetables half when they're cooked. And your protein decreases by about 20 or 25%. That's just kind of a good estimate to go by whenever you're thinking about the portion sizes that they say versus what you're going to start cooking. And then on MyFitnessPal, we're recommending everyone to use MyFitnessPal during this challenge because it syncs up with the HSN app that we're all using. It's really user friendly. The recipes are already on there. It helps track a lot of the things. We are sending out a paper food log if you would rather write it down, but that's not going to tell you as much as MyFitnessPal is going to tell you. So here is a picture of one of the meal plans. We have, in that first one where it says 2 to 3 eggs, that's what I was talking about, kind of the range. And then also for the meal plan, you can substitute things. If there's something that you hate eating or if you're allergic to something, come and talk to me about it because the point of all of this is to stay balanced. So as long as we're substituting things in the same family, then we can still maintain that balance. And then also, you can switch your meals by row, but not by column. Meaning, we can switch our Friday lunch to our Saturday lunch, but not our Friday snack to our Friday lunch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can keep that change in the row, but not in the column. All right, and so meal prepping. If you haven't tried meal prepping, it's going to be really helpful. Just pick a day in the week. A lot of people do it on Sunday, which is a good way to get your week started. But if your schedule is weird, or if you like having that midweek kind of pick me up where you start cleaning on Wednesday, then you can do it that day. Just make sure that it's consistent. So whatever day you decide to do it for this 6-week challenge, make sure you keep doing it on that day every week. You don't want to meal plan on Monday and then again on Wednesday. For the recipes that we're including in this meal plan, it would be helpful to have an Instant Pot or a crock pot. If you don't have it, you can still make do, but it would be helpful if you do have it. And then on days whenever you're running behind or you don't have time to meal prep, we are going to make sure that we have meals out front that we can substitute in to the meal plan. So we'll all talk about it so that everyone kind of knows which meals those are if you need help whenever you're trying to grab a meal on your way out from your workout. I know that for this first week we have, I believe, about 6 meals that are going to work into that meal plan. I know that like Wednesday dinner, for example, I think Friday lunch. There's a few on there that you'll always be able to get here. So if you feel like you missed a meal and now everything is thrown off, it doesn't have to be. You can still grab it. And so back to consistency, I know a lot of people are worried about eating every 3 hours, but it's going to be really helpful. It's going to help your metabolism a lot, and it's a really good routine and habit to get into. You don't have to eat giant portions every 3 hours. You can eat 5 small meals throughout the day. You can eat 3 normal size and 2 smaller snacks, whatever kind of fits into what you want. But try to really make sure that we're eating those every 3 hours that the meal plan suggests.